55 years ago this week, civil rights leader Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated while on the balcony of the Lorraine Motel in Memphis, Tennessee.
Throughout history, individual acts of violence have often taken center stage, leaving an indelible mark on the annals of time. While many deaths and murders have occurred over millennia, a select few have not only shocked societies, but also redirected the very course of history. These are not mere tales of crime. They are events that shifted paradigms, triggered wars, and spawned movements. This video dives deep into 10 such startling assassinations, beginning with the political turmoil of ancient Rome and the murder of one of its most prominent figures, Julius Caesar. Number 1. The murder of Julius Caesar, 44 BC. Julius Caesar, a military genius and political strategist, remains a towering figure in Roman history. His rise to power was marked by victories, reforms, and the audacity to cross the Rubicon, triggering a civil war that he subsequently won. But his ascent to unparalleled power was met with equal measure of admiration and trepidation. On the Ides of March in 44 BC, Caesar's reign came to a shocking end, stabbed by those he thought allies in one of history's most infamous political assassinations. The motive behind Caesar's assassination was multifaceted. Many senators feared that Caesar, who had declared himself dictator in perpetuity, aimed to become a monarch, effectively ending the Roman Republic. They believed that by killing him, they were saving Rome from potential tyranny. This coalition called themselves the Liberators. On that fateful day, as Caesar entered the Senate House near the Theater of Pompey, he was surrounded by senators, including some of his closest allies. Unbeknownst to him, beneath their togas, many hid daggers. As the attack commenced, Servilius Casca was the first to strike, to which Caesar reportedly responded, "Casca, you villain, what are you doing?" But soon, as many as 23 stab wounds were inflicted upon him. Among the conspirators was Marcus Junius Brutus, a trusted friend of Caesar. The now iconic phrase, "Et tu, Brute?" and "you, Brutus," whether apocryphal or real, encapsulates the ultimate betrayal Caesar must have felt in that moment. The aftermath of Caesar's assassination led to another civil war. This time, the major players were the second triumvirate, consisting of Mark Antony, Octavian, later Augustus Caesar, and Marcus Aemilius Lepidus, pitted against the forces of Brutus and Cassius. The triumvirate emerged victorious, leading Octavian to become the first Roman emperor. Far from saving the Republic, the murder of Caesar directly paved the way for the Roman Empire. The death of Julius Caesar is a quintessential example of how political violence, no matter how well-intentioned, can have unforeseen and lasting consequences. The senators who conspired against Caesar believed they were acting in Rome's best interest, but their actions inadvertently brought about the very monarchy they sought to prevent. His death not only marked the end of one man's life, but also the Roman Republic itself. The echoes of that fateful day in 44 BC reverberate through time, serving as a potent reminder of the volatile blend of power, ambition, and conspiracy. Number 2. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, 1914. In the panorama of historical events, few single acts of violence have had the catalytic effect quite like the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria in 1914. A shot fired in Sarajevo on a summer's day not only claimed the lives of the heir to the Austro-Hungarian Empire and his wife, but also set in motion a chain reaction that led to the most devastating war the world had yet seen, World War I. Archduke Franz Ferdinand was not merely an heir to a throne. He was a reformer, with plans to reconstitute the faltering Austro-Hungarian Empire and provide greater rights to the diverse ethnic groups within its domain. His approach, although well-intentioned, ruffled many feathers, both within and outside the empire. To Serbia, a neighboring nation with ambitions of forming a greater Slavic state, the Archduke's plans were seen as a direct threat. On June 28, 1914, Franz Ferdinand and his wife, Duchess Sophie, visited Sarajevo in Bosnia, a region recently annexed by Austria-Hungary, much to the resentment of nationalist Serbs. The couple's route and schedule were publicly known, a grave oversight in an era of high tensions and nationalist fervor. A group of young Bosnian Serbs, armed and trained by the secretive Black Hand organization, plotted to assassinate the Archduke. Their first attempt that day, a grenade thrown at the Archduke's motorcade, failed, injuring bystanders and officials in another car. Undeterred, Franz Ferdinand decided to visit the wounded from the earlier bombing at the hospital. En route, a wrong turn and a stalled engine brought his car face-to-face with Gavrilo Princip, one of the earlier conspirators. Seizing the opportunity, Princip fired 2 shots, killing both the Archduke and his wife. The immediate fallout was an outpouring of grief and anger. Austria-Hungary, with Germany's support, issued an ultimatum to Serbia, believing them complicit in the assassination. When Serbia's response didn't meet all of Austria-Hungary's stringent demands, it was used as a casus belli, a cause for war. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand serves as a grim reminder of how individual acts can intersect with broader political and military strategies, triggering events of unimaginable scale. One can't help but reflect on the cascade of events that followed that fateful day in Sarajevo and wonder, if not for that wrong turn, if not for that single bullet, how different would the contours of the 20th century have been? Number 3. The killing of Martin Luther King Jr., 1968. Amidst the tumultuous backdrop of the 1960s, where cries for civil rights rang out alongside those protesting the Vietnam War, the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. stands as a poignant moment that changed the course of American history. Dr. King wasn't just a civil rights leader, he was a beacon of hope for millions, championing the cause of racial equality and justice through nonviolence. His death sent shockwaves across a nation already divided, pushing it to confront its long-standing issues of racism and inequality. Dr. King was in Memphis, Tennessee on April 4, 1968, supporting a strike of African-American sanitation workers who were protesting against poor working conditions and discrimination. Staying at the Lorraine Motel, he stepped out onto the balcony in the late afternoon. At 6:01 p.m., a sniper's bullet struck him. The vibrant voice that had so passionately spoken of dreams, freedom, and equality was tragically silenced. James Earl Ray, a petty criminal and vehement racist, was arrested and later pleaded guilty to the murder, though conspiracy theories around the assassination persist to this day. Moreover, Dr. King's legacy grew larger in death. He became an enduring symbol of the civil rights movement, with his speeches, writings, and acts of civil disobedience serving as inspiration for countless future activists not just in the United States but around the world. Streets, schools, and monuments were named in his honor, and in 1986, Martin Luther King Jr. Day was established as a national holiday, ensuring that future generations would learn about his mission and sacrifice. However, the assassination also underscored the deeply entrenched racial issues in America. While legislative changes were made and overt racism became less socially acceptable, covert institutional racism persisted. The debates and struggles for racial equality and justice that Dr. King championed remain alive, as evidenced by subsequent movements like Black Lives Matter. In reflecting on the tragic killing of Martin Luther King Jr., one is reminded of the fragility and significance of leadership. Dr. King's voice, which once echoed through the streets of Montgomery, the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, and the bridges of Selma, was brutally silenced. But his vision, one of an America where individuals are judged not by the color of their skin but by the content of their character, endures, inspiring ongoing efforts towards justice and equality. Number 4. The execution of Tsar Nicholas II and his family, 1918. The early 20th century was a time of immense political upheaval in Russia. Amid a backdrop of social unrest, war, and revolution, one of the most chilling episodes was the execution of Tsar Nicholas II and his entire family. The last emperor of Russia, his demise marked the end of the Romanov dynasty, which had ruled for over 3 centuries and solidified the rise of Bolshevik power. Nicholas II ascended to the throne in 1894 with grand hopes of continuing the traditions of his ancestors. However, his reign was marked by political miscalculations, national tragedies like the Kodinka tragedy and Bloody Sunday, and the disastrous involvement in World War I. These events, combined with a rapidly modernizing society and an ailing economy, led to widespread discontent. The brutal manner of their deaths and the subsequent attempts to hide the bodies only added to the horror of the event. It was only in 1991 that the remains of most of the family and their retainers were exhumed and identified. The final two missing Romanov children, Alexei and Maria, were discovered in 2007. The repercussions of the execution were manifold. Domestically, it sent a clear message about the ruthlessness of the Bolshevik regime and their determination to obliterate the old world order. It solidified their control, eliminating the figurehead the White Army rallied behind. Internationally, the killings drew widespread condemnation. The Romanovs had close ties to many European royal families, and their brutal end further isolated the fledgling Soviet government from the international community. But beyond politics, the execution of the Romanovs was a profound tragedy on a human level. Historians often focus on Nicholas's ineffective leadership, but it's essential to remember that the victims of that night were not just rulers. They were parents, children, siblings, a family. Today, the Church on the Blood stands on the spot of the Ipatiev House, a memorial to the last Tsar and his family. It serves as a poignant reminder of the fragile intersection of personal lives and sweeping historical change. The Romanovs, with all their flaws and privileges, were the final tragic chapter in a centuries-old dynasty, their lives and deaths emblematic of the turbulent era that transformed Russia forever. Number 5. The Murder of Abraham Lincoln, 1865. Abraham Lincoln, the 16th President of the United States, is one of the most iconic figures in American history, leading the nation through its bloodiest conflict, the Civil War. Lincoln sought to preserve the Union and end the institution of slavery. Just days after the war's end, a gunshot in Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C. would cut short his life and alter the trajectory of the nation's post-war reconstruction. The nation was plunged into shock and mourning. The Civil War had just ended, and the country looked towards a future of healing and reconstruction under Lincoln's leadership. His death left a leadership void, and the tumultuous period that followed, the Reconstruction era, was marked by intense political strife and racial tensions. Booth was hunted down and cornered in a barn in Virginia. Refusing to surrender, he was shot by a Union soldier and died shortly after, but not before allegedly uttering his last words, "Useless, useless." The impact of Lincoln's assassination on the United States was monumental. His vice president, Andrew Johnson, took office, and his approach to Reconstruction was vastly different from Lincoln's vision. Johnson's lenient policies towards the South and reluctance to support civil rights for freed slaves led to clashes with the radical Republicans in Congress. The direction of the nation's healing and the fate of millions of newly emancipated African Americans hung in the balance. Moreover, Lincoln's death elevated him to martyrdom. He became a symbol of American ideals and the sacrifices made for those ideals. His Emancipation Proclamation, the Gettysburg Address, and other speeches were no longer just the words of a sitting president, but the lasting legacy of a fallen hero. In retrospect, Lincoln's assassination was not just a tragic event, but a pivotal moment in U.S. history. It disrupted the potential for a smoother, more integrative path to Reconstruction. The racial and regional scars of the Civil War lingered, in part due to the leadership vacuum and political turbulence that followed Lincoln's death. Today, Ford's Theater stands as both a working theater and a museum, a tribute to the great leader's legacy. Visitors can ponder the profound impact of that single gunshot in 1865 and reflect on the delicate balance between individual actions and the broader sweep of history. The murder of Abraham Lincoln serves as a somber reminder of the fragility of leadership and the profound consequences that can ripple out from a single, violent act. Number 6. The assassination of Mahatma Gandhi, 1948. Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi, more commonly known as Mahatma Gandhi, was not only the father of the Indian nation, but a global beacon for non-violent resistance and civil rights. His philosophy of satyagraha, or non-violent resistance, played a pivotal role in India's quest for independence from British rule. Yet, ironically, a life dedicated to peace and non-violence met a violent end on January 30th, 1948. Godse, motivated by a perception that Gandhi was appeasing Muslims at the expense of Hindus, viewed him as a traitor to the Hindu cause. Godse's act was not impulsive but premeditated, stemming from an extremist ideology that saw no place for Gandhi's inclusive vision of India. The shockwaves from Gandhi's assassination reverberated globally. World leaders from Winston Churchill to Albert Einstein expressed their grief and condolences. In India, millions poured onto the streets in a state of collective mourning. Here was a man who had led them to freedom without firing a single bullet, now felled by the very violence he had so vehemently opposed. Godse and his accomplice were swiftly arrested, tried, and eventually executed. However, the assassination underscored the deep-seated communal tensions within the newly independent India. While the immediate aftermath saw an outpouring of grief and unity, the issues of religious extremism and intolerance that had taken Gandhi's life remained unresolved. In the long term, Gandhi's death marked the beginning of a complex journey for India. On one hand, his ideals of secularism, unity, and non-violence became foundational to the world's largest democracy. His legacy continued to inspire countless movements worldwide, from the civil rights movement in the U.S. under Martin Luther King Jr. to the anti-apartheid struggle in South Africa led by Nelson Mandela. On the other hand, the ideological divides that had culminated in his assassination persisted. The vision of a secular India, where all religions coexisted harmoniously, has continually been tested by bouts of communal violence and growing religious polarization. The place of Gandhi's assassination is now a memorial called Gandhi Smriti. It stands as a poignant reminder of a life dedicated to peace, love, and unity. Visitors can trace his last footsteps frozen in time, leading to the exact spot where he fell. The assassination of Mahatma Gandhi is a testament to the enduring struggle between the forces of unity and division, tolerance, and bigotry. While the bullets of Godse silenced Gandhi, they couldn't erase his vision or ideals, which continue to inspire millions around the world. Number 7. The death of Thomas Becket, Archbishop of Canterbury, 1170. The dramatic assassination of Thomas Becket in the hallowed precincts of Canterbury Cathedral on December 29, 1170, reverberated throughout medieval Europe. This act, which saw the murder of the Archbishop of Canterbury by knights loyal to King Henry II of England, not only exposed the tensions between church and crown, but also had lasting implications for the balance of power in the country. Thomas Becket and Henry II began their relationship as close friends. When Henry appointed Becket as the Archbishop of Canterbury in 1162, it was with the expectation that Becket would prioritize royal authority over church autonomy. However, Becket's transformation from a loyal chancellor to a staunch defender of the church's interests took many, including the king, by surprise. The shock of the murder was profound. To see a leading prelate of the church murdered in his own cathedral, ostensibly on the orders of the king, was an affront to both religious and secular sensibilities. It sent a clear message about the lengths to which the crown would go to assert its dominance. However, the aftermath did not unfold as Henry might have anticipated. Becket was quickly canonized as a martyr by the Catholic Church. Pilgrims from across Europe flocked to his shrine at Canterbury, as popularized in Geoffrey Chaucer's The Canterbury Tales. Miracles were said to occur at his tomb, reinforcing his sanctified status. Realizing the gravity of his mistake, Henry underwent public penance. In a striking act of humility, he walked barefoot to Canterbury and allowed monks to scourge him as a sign of repentance. This act was more than just personal atonement. It was a political move to restore the shaken trust of his subjects and the Church. The death of Becket and the subsequent fallout forced a recalibration of the relationship between the English monarchy and the Church. While the Church maintained a high degree of autonomy, the Crown also retained significant control, setting a precedent for future monarchs. Thomas Becket's murder remains emblematic of the age-old tensions between spiritual and temporal powers. His death, though brutal, gave rise to a new understanding of the balance of authority in medieval England and underscored the lengths individuals might go to in defense of their convictions. Today, a single candle burns in Canterbury Cathedral, marking the spot where Becket was slain, serving as a silent testament to his enduring legacy and the complexities of church-state relations. Number 8. The killing of Malcolm X, 1965. Malcolm X, born Malcolm Little, and later known as El-Hajj Malik el-Shabazz after his pilgrimage to Mecca, was a towering figure in the American civil rights movement. His transformation from a street hustler to an eloquent spokesperson for the Nation of Islam, NOI, and later a global advocate for the rights of Black people is a testament to the power of personal evolution and the pursuit of truth. Yet this journey, marked by controversy and conviction, ended in bloodshed. On February 21, 1965, Malcolm X stepped onto the stage of the Audubon Ballroom in New York City. As he began addressing the crowd, a disturbance erupted. Amidst the chaos, a man rushed forward and shot him multiple times with a shotgun. 2 other men joined in, firing handguns. Malcolm X was pronounced dead within hours, a tragic end to a life marked by both conflict and enlightenment. The immediate suspects in his assassination were members of the NOI. Malcolm had once been a prominent voice for the group, but after discovering troubling aspects about its leadership and undergoing a transformative pilgrimage to Mecca, which instilled in him a more universal perspective on race and spirituality, he left the organization. This departure was not amicable, leading to public feuds and private threats. Talmadge Hayer, Norman 3X Butler, and Thomas 15X Johnson were swiftly arrested and convicted for the murder. All were members of the NOI, but there has been endless speculation and investigation about the full extent of the conspiracy, especially regarding potential government involvement or negligence. The impact of Malcolm X's death was profound. While he had been a controversial figure, often portrayed by the media as promoting hate and violence, a portrayal he refuted and which evolved considerably over time, his assassination was widely mourned. He had become a symbol of Black pride, self-worth, and resistance against systemic racism. In death, Malcolm X's influence grew. His autobiography, penned with Alex Haley, became an essential text, providing deep insights into the Black American experience and the transformative potential of radical self-awareness. Subsequent generations of activists, scholars, and global leaders have drawn from his teachings, finding in them a wellspring of inspiration for justice, equity, and personal growth. Today, the site of the Audubon Ballroom is home to the Malcolm X and Dr. Betty Shabazz Memorial and Educational Center, preserving his legacy and serving as a poignant reminder of the costs and consequences of the battle for civil rights. The killing of Malcolm X remains not just a somber chapter in American history, but also an enduring call to confront injustice with unwavering courage and conviction. Number 9. The assassination of President John F. Kennedy, 1963. November 22, 1963, is a date seared into the collective memory of Americans and many around the world. It's the day when John Fitzgerald Kennedy, the 35th President of the United States, was assassinated while riding in a motorcade through Dealey Plaza in Dallas, Texas. His sudden and violent death would forever alter the course of American history. Kennedy's death had profound implications for the U.S. and the world. It marked the end of the post, World War II era's optimism, and gave rise to a more cynical and distrusting view of government. The subsequent escalation of the Vietnam War, the Civil Rights Movement, and the overall cultural shift of the 1960s can, in many ways, be traced back to the trauma of that day in Dallas. On a global scale, the Cold War dynamics shifted, with Lyndon B. Johnson inheriting the presidency. While Kennedy had begun tentative outreach to the Soviet Union and had considered de-escalating in Vietnam, Johnson's tenure would see a ramp-up in Vietnam and heightened Cold War tensions. Today, the grassy knoll, the Texas School Book Depository building from where Oswald took his shots, and Dealey Plaza have become places of pilgrimage. They stand as somber reminders of a moment when the trajectory of an entire nation shifted irrevocably. JFK's assassination remains a topic of fascination, speculation, and sorrow. It's a wound in the American psyche, a tragic reminder of the fragility of hope and the enduring impact of a single moment in history. Number 10. The murder of Empress Elizabeth of Austria, 1898. Empress Elizabeth of Austria, affectionately known as Sisi, was a beloved figurehead in the sprawling Austro-Hungarian Empire. With her legendary beauty, melancholic nature, and fervent desire for personal freedom, Sisi captured the hearts of many. Yet her tragic end on September 10, 1898, was as unexpected as it was brutal. Walking along the promenade of Geneva, Switzerland, the 60-year-old empress was approached by an Italian anarchist named Luigi Lucchini. Driven more by a desire to kill a royal, any royal, than by personal animosity towards Sisi, Lucchini fatally stabbed her with a sharpened needle file. The attack was so swift and the weapon so thin that the empress did not immediately realize the gravity of her injury. She collapsed shortly thereafter and died. Empress Elizabeth's life was marked by personal tragedies, including the suicide of her son, Crown Prince Rudolph, at Mayerling. Her death added another layer of melancholy to her legend. The Wandering Empress, as she was sometimes called due to her extensive travels, was immortalized in poetry, art, and film, with her story captivating millions. In historical terms, the assassination underscored the vulnerabilities of the European monarchies. As the 19th century gave way to the 20th, the old structures of power were being questioned and, in many cases, violently challenged. The death of Sisi was, in many ways, a precursor to the larger and more dramatic changes that would engulf Europe in the years leading up to World War I. Today, the life and death of Empress Elizabeth remain an intriguing chapter in the annals of European royalty. Her legacy, a blend of myth and reality, serves as a poignant reflection on the end of an era and the inexorable tide of change.